Okay. So yeah, hi everybody, it's Martina Decveska with the Empire Team at Spire Group, and today we're streaming live for RED and in NYC. And I have here Elliot Horowitz with H Equities and renowned architect Andres Escobar with LeMay plus Escobar, who is responsible for some beautiful skyscrapers here and other buildings all over the world. I just want to use first the time to thank to our sponsors, which are CNA, Seneca Construction, Champion Elevators, Skyline Scaffolding, City Bay Capital, Clean to Clean, Remax 100, Eco Safety, View, Property Shark, Hydrotech and Environmental, and of course to Selman Yautsin, who is hosting and organizing this meeting with his RED in NYC networking group. So guys, how are you feeling today?
Great, thankfully. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're doing great. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. And today we're gonna talk about, it's gonna be a talk about the COVID-19 realities now. I know that many people are worried about the state of the market. I work with many buyers, and you guys are also well versed in the real estate industry, and you know that people are, more hesitant to buy right now, more hesitant to invest. So I wanted, as a first question, to get your perspective on what do you think, like, what do you see from your perspective? What do you think that the market is gonna crash? Do you think there are new opportunities coming in? Do you see a rebound soon? What is your perspective? And if Elliot wants to start first.
Go ahead, Elliot.
Sure, thank you. I wish I knew, right? No, so the answer is we're debt and equity investors, primarily in multifamily. And some of that's in New York and some of that's out of state in Atlanta and Florida, New Jersey, but specifically to New York, because this is probably mostly a New York office. Clearly there's been nobody's really benefited from this COVID thing, right? So, and clearly there's been a change in buyer appetite from a commercial standpoint. I mean, buyers of multifamily properties, certainly of retail properties. You haven't necessarily seen prices come down a lot because there's been a total sort of shutdown of transactions, other than transactions that were in place, prior to, let's say, March, whatever, before everything sort of shut down. But you have seen some transactions close, but probably they've been worked on way before COVID happened. So, but right now, a lot of sellers have pulled back because they don't really need to sell. They were trying to get a price, and a lot of buyers have pulled back because they kind of want better pricing. But that's been happening even pre-COVID, since the rent stabilized laws changed last year, which had, in my opinion, even more detrimental effect on pricing than COVID. COVID's coming and going, hopefully one day soon, but the laws that put into effect, have hurt landlords and tenants alike, even though it might not be readily apparent to the politicians who pass these laws. But I do think there'll be a lot of opportunity specifically here, from a buying standpoint, from a lending standpoint, because people always need money, and but just at lower valuations.
Okay, and do you think that now that we're approaching phase 2, I personally see increased activity of people? I actually got a unit in contract yesterday on a price higher than the offer we got pre-COVID. So there are people out there. Do you see, from your perspective on the multifamily, a rebound and more activity happening now than, let's say, what we've been seeing since mid-March when that was?
Right. Look, so if someone's buying a house for themselves, sometimes it's more job related or it's more emotional related, right? So if someone's buying a building and they want to invest for the future, it should be more numbers related, right? So if I think something's worth $1 and you think it's worth $2, I might pay you $1.05, but I'm not paying you $1.90, right? So it's a little different on the commercial end. Myself, we're buying nothing in New York and haven't. We've lent a lot of money in New York specifically, whether it's in a multifamily building, a piece of land, or a condo development, but we've been buying out of state. So, and the out of state purchases, the out of state markets are a little more robust at the moment relative to New York, which got hit a lot harder from this COVID, and then the other stuff that's been happening lately that's in the news, right? So a little more challenging here, but in time, I think it'll change for the benefit of all of us.
Yeah, because we've been seeing, when you look at the past 100 years of the New York City market, there is always ups and downs, but eventually it always goes up. So that has been why so many people, want to put their money in New York. It's first the appreciation in up and coming areas, because we have areas like Bushwick who can appreciate 50% year over year, and they have in the past. And that's very, in central Jersey, you're looking at 2% appreciation. So maybe the return on investment is not there, but the possibility for the future is. So I personally keep telling my advisors, advise my clients, especially if they're looking for the long run, that this will, New York will always be New York. It's been in rougher moments, right? We've seen it. It's a rough city. That's the reality of it. It's, it's just the way it is.
Martina, from my perspective, and to Elliot's point, I think that there's an opportunity to acquire properties at a better value. What Elliot alluded to is that the asking price is not necessarily the end price. I think what developers are looking for is to have the opportunity to renegotiate the deals and to be able to place themselves at a position where their base points are much more attractive to develop. And Elliot is totally correct when he stated the fact that the authorities, Mayor de Blasio and so on and so forth, I probably was a little bit more detrimental at a certain point than the actual COVID. I think that everybody is just finding ways to streamline their investments. However, we haven't seen a decline in the optimism. And I think that, as I mentioned to you previously on a previous conversation, I think that what we're seeing is that New Yorkers are amazing, and they have this dexterity and strength to move forward. And I think that what we're seeing is that the market is going to come back. I don't foresee a total decline in the market. I see lots of opportunities, and based on my conversations this week and the past week with my clients, they're planning to move forward with a lot of projects. Elliot, what do you think?
Yeah, it depends, right, on one's time horizon, right? If your time horizon is forever, you have a little more time to work through the challenges. If your time horizon is, I've got to pay off my bank tomorrow or next week, it's a little more challenging, right? So developers by nature are optimistic. That's why they're developers, right? So they always think the future is going to be great. Maybe somebody like myself, who's a lender or an investor, I'm a little less optimistic. That's why I'm not a developer, but I'm sort of cautiously optimistic because New York has had many up and down cycles over time, many up and down cycles over many, many decades. It's historical proven fact almost. It's that you just need to kind of figure out, how does COVID change the picture, which nobody really knows. And we're all sort of guessing. Everyone's become a COVID-19 expert in the last 90 days, including myself, right? So we're all sort of experts on this, and you have to factor in other political ramifications of what's happening around town. It's hard to notice it and kind of, see and project what'll be in 2-3 years from now, right? So right now, there's probably, I think there's reason for optimism, but like cautious optimism.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And Andres, what do you see? You're responsible for some, the Sutton and other luxury buildings in New York City. You do a lot of luxury projects. You did the Four Seasons in Montreal, right? So do you see your clients cutting costs and going for less luxury finishes in order to phase out this situation we're in, or not? That's something I've been.
No, I think that developers have to adapt to the new reality. I don't think that is a matter of spending less. I think it's to utilize their investment in a much smarter way. We have to, and hopefully they'll listen to the professionals, But what I believe is that everyone has to find ways to amenitize the buildings and to provide better living standards to face the new reality. What we're facing today is a pandemic unheard of, nothing that we've known before, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this is the last that we're going to have. So we have to make sure that we prepare for future possibilities. As Elliot mentioned, I mean, until we don't have a solution to the existing pandemic, it's kind of hard to guesstimate what's going to happen. But I believe that new construction has to be thought out in a much more pragmatic way, and to be able to deliver a much better product to satisfy the very intelligent New York clientele.
Are you, and by the way, that's a good time. I wanted to mention that Andres, you're receiving an award, RED Award 2020 for Architecture and Design Innovator of the Year. And also you have an extensive career spanning more than 20 years. So that's just something to mention, that
very nice.
REDNYC. I'm sure you're well decorated with other awards as well, because your work is really beautiful and stunning. Do you see now more like thinking more social distancing way? Because you know what was huge in New York City in big developments was the amenities. But now with the social distancing, people may be more reluctant to use these amenities. You know, I'm a swimmer myself. I don't know when I'm going to be able to go in my gym to use the pool because, you know, sauna, all these things. Do you think we're going to have to adapt the amenities towards that, or think about more social distancing? Let's say maybe more private outdoor spaces rather than a big rule. Do you see a demand for that or not yet? Or you think we're going to just keep going the same way with design and architecture?
Well, you know, historically, New Yorkers have faced many, as Elliot mentioned before, difficulties. You have 9/11, you have Sandy, you have many adversities that came through. And I think that although at the very beginning, everybody reacts in a certain manner, the vast majority of people kind of tend to forget. The younger the demographic, the quicker they forget. The more susceptible people, they kind of like, it lingers a little bit longer. But one thing that I believe that we should provide residences or you know, the end user is the ability to have maybe their gym and their workplace in their own home. With technology today, with a mirror, and I believe there's another protocol, Tune, if I'm not, or Total or something like that basically allows you to do your workout at home. I think that will be a great amenity to be provided in higher end and middle of the road type of developments. So it's just, what we need to do is, I think we are in a moment of reflection where professionals, developers, brokers, marketing teams should, you know, come up with solutions that will provide this sort of environment that, in the event that something similar to this would happen again, that we are prepared for it. Again, it's kind of hard to guesstimate what's going to happen, but I think that we should be ready to at least try to find solutions for the future.
And Elliot, what do you think about that?
That's a good point, right? So if you have an existing building that has 4 elevator banks, you still have only 4 elevator banks, right? Or 6, you're not adding new elevator banks, right? And if you have a gym already on the 35th floor or whatever floor it's on, what are you going to do with it, right? So I think most people like the social interaction of going to a gym. If you poll 10 people on the street, probably 9 of them want to get back to full swing again, right? So I think going forward, I don't know how, and I'm not an architect. Like I told you before, I have zero design skill, right? I don't know how you build a 200 or 300 unit building or even a 12 unit building with 17 elevator banks for a person. The penthouse guy will have his own elevator, and that's wonderful for him. But the rest of us common folk don't have their own elevator, right? So maybe a personal little gym, like we still have lobby, other amenitized roof deck space, and if 50 tenants decide they want to use the roof deck that fits 50 people, like where they're going to go, right? So like in Domino Park, my son lives down the block, and you have those big circles they put in Domino Park, right? So whether it's working or not working, I don't know, but can you start putting circles on your roof deck, in your gym, in the lobby? Like certainly in the elevators, it doesn't work, right? So there has to be some unavoidable social contact you're going forward.
Yeah, I agree. And then another thing.
Yeah, Elliot is totally right. New construction, you could be a little bit more creative. Existing buildings is a bit of a challenge. And I think that the elevator example that Elliot alluded to is one of the major ones. A lot of the buildings only allowed 50% occupancy on the elevators. And again, some people may not even feel comfortable about being in an elevator with somebody else. So yeah, but as I said, this is an open discussion that will take place with everyone around the table, and we may not find the perfect solution, but we could certainly find compromises and how to approach things in a different manner. When it comes to an existing building, there will be a certain approach, and when it comes to a new building, perhaps if you're looking at ultra luxury, there should be a totally different solution.
What do you think that solution would be in the ultra
luxury? Well, there's many aspects of it. It's not only the elevator, it's about the quality of air in the building, the outdoor space, whether or not you could have a balcony. And if you cannot afford to have a balcony, maybe have a Juliet balcony, which at least it allows you to open up and, get some fresh air in your unit, the quality of light, the design of your unit to be efficient and well designed so that every single thing that you require is part of a comprehensive package. It's not only about a kitchen, it's not only about a bathroom. When people talk about buying an apartment, the first thing they want to see what the kitchen looks like and what the master bathroom looks like. But what about your office? What about your exercise space? What about your light and air? What about your windows? What about your balcony? What about the exposure to nature? So I think that what this COVID had taught us is that there's a lot more to it than just being in an apartment that is kind of like hermetically sealed. I don't think that we were meant to be in a hermetically sealed environment.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you about that. What are the current trends? If you want to talk a little bit about, stepping out of the COVID situation, what are the current trends and what you see that your clients want to put in their buildings? What's trending? And then maybe Elliot, if you can talk a little bit about what do you see people investing in right now, which are the hottest items out there, if I can put it that way.
Want me to go first?
Sure. Go ahead, Elliot.
No problem. So I don't like to use the word hot with real estate because it always ends badly, right? So I think what some people I'm seeing are doing or they're trying to do is still complete some of their construction projects, which have been severely delayed, just obviously because of COVID, but preceding that because of just city bureaucracy. Many New York investors have been looking outside of New York, and that's a reality that has to be dealt with by New York, right? And how to bring investment back, how to bring people back. In the debt business, we're seeing a lot of requests from developers to finish buildings that are half built where the lenders don't want to fund it anymore, which is challenging. To start taking on a project that's in sort of mid-construction and which normally would have been a very easily fundable project, 3, 6, 8 months ago, a year ago for sure, a little more challenging. So, but there's definitely opportunity to find, nicer buildings in and around the boroughs of New York that may be in need of some sort of sprucing up or facelifting, but the rent stabilized laws made it virtually impossible to generate any value from the rent stabilized tenants inside. And furthermore, it took away value that the tenants themselves had, because those tenants who have rent stabilized leases had an asset that was worth money, and that asset is now worth nothing to them, right? Because the law took it away, or the politicians took it away specifically. So I don't know that I don't see a specific trend at the moment in New York. I think a lot of people are looking for value in terms of rents of existing apartment buildings, and developers who are midstream really can't. I think it's very hard. Again, I'm not an architect or a developer, but it's very hard to sort of change your project when you're already 30 floors up. And then what left unsaid was, what about the thousands of old housing stock? Buildings are 30, 40, 50, 80 years old. There's not much you can do with those buildings, right? And all the city-run buildings, NYCHA, many New Yorkers live in these buildings that there's virtually no chance the city could figure out what to do with it. So I don't know, there might be a hot trend in residential with maybe indoor, for brand new development, let's say, for indoor gym or more balcony space, but for the majority of people, it doesn't really apply, right? For that 20 million buyer, which is sort of for us, it applies, but for the rest of the world, may not apply. So for us, we're just looking for value where we see it in terms of investing in projects, whether it's existing multifamily or new construction, or whether it's debt or equity.
How about the townhouse conversions? For example, you buy all cash, 4-family in Crown Heights, and just empty shell, converted to condos, 4 or 5 units boutique development. Do you see that's still going strong and more demand into free market units, since the rent stabilized market has been so severely distressed?
It had been strong up until about January, let's say. It was even slowing down a little bit in the last 3 months. Clearly, stopped almost everything. It all comes down to price, right? So what entices somebody to live in Crown Heights versus Bed-Stuy versus the Upper East Side? It could be family, it could be pricing, it could be, in Bushwick, you can get $1,000 a foot for a $500,000 apartment. So that buyer isn't looking at $1,000 a foot. They're looking, I can buy a little home, small, nice home in a building for $500,000. The buyer of the $4 million townhome or the $1.5 million townhome has different options. They may be more sensitive to per square foot location. Their job may be around the corner. Their mother may live down the block, right? So, it's a big place. Every buyer, has what they're looking for that fits their life and their budget, right? So I asked a rental broker a couple of years ago, why does someone spend $30,000 a month on an apartment? And he said, because they do, right? That was his answer, because they do, right? So why does somebody spend $500,000 on something? That's what they can afford, right? So I think there's a buyer for a boutique building who wants to be in a 5-unit building because they like small and it's quiet. But then there's the buyer who wants that much larger amenitized building, which exists in, all over New York today, but maybe some different shape and form going forward.
Okay.
But Martina, I think that to Elliot's point that he made before is, what do you do with existing apartment buildings, condominium buildings that are already dated? And I think from my perspective, it's a time of reflection and how can we make them better? We cannot make them perfect, but there's certainly opportunities to enhance the living experience within those buildings. And I think that obviously when you're doing a ground up project, you have a lot more opportunities to come close to where the ideal environment will be, whatever that may be, obviously, because it has to do, as Elliot said, with dollars and cents and what the end price is going to be and how efficient the building is. And we all know the story. It's not only about how beautiful it is, but it's what am I getting for what's the best buck for the money, right? So, but certainly these testing times allow us to reflect and maybe to come up with solutions that in some cases may not be the perfect solution, but at least the idea of trying to provide a better environment for people to cohabitate and to you see, like right now, the big word is social distancing. What that does mean? I mean, right now we all have an appreciation for what that would be, but 6 months down the line, I mean, it might be a little bit different. So reflection, conversation, exchanging ideas, brainstorming with developers, with investors, and eventually we'll come up with the proper solution for specific projects, and not all of them are going to be the same. It's going to be a permutation of answers for specific projects.
Okay, and what are you working on right now? And then we'll ask Elliot the same thing as well, if you want to share some of your current projects.
Oh, we're working on a variety of projects. We're working in hotels, which I think is actually a very testing time for the hospitality industry. We're working on condominiums, both in the city, in Jersey and in Brooklyn. We have recently signed some micro unit projects in New Jersey. People are looking at the developers that are committed and that they have the financing. They're moving forward. We're definitely talking amongst ourselves to what would be the best solution for whatever project we're doing. But people in New York, they're survivors, and they just move forward. So I think that what will come out of it may not be the ideal solution, but certainly they will be improved from what we originally started.
Okay, and Elliot, you want to talk a little bit about your current?
Sure. We made a few loans recently to developers. One in Astoria on a condo project, a couple small buildings in Brooklyn, and a loan in Soho. So there's been a lot of activity on the lending side for developers and others who need liquidity needs. We've been trying to buy a few properties out of state. Nothing's come to fruition at the moment. We're actively quoting other loans for borrowers, specifically in New York, for either development or existing properties that they own with liquidity needs. We've looked at a few projects, a few multifamily buildings in New York to buy, but from my perspective, from our investors' perspective, and partners' perspective, we need better pricing, because we're not emotional about this. I don't have to buy that building. I don't have to live there. So we have to make sure whatever we're going to buy, is fairly priced for today. And we're definitely doing a lot of asset managing on properties that we own that have other challenges pre-COVID from the rent stabilized laws that have passed. We're managing a lot of those problems on a day.
Yes, that's something else that I'm glad to. The connection broke for a second, but I have you back in. I'm glad that you're bringing that topic because I wanted to also ask you, just as you said, and I agree with you, there has been the distress in our business have started with this rent stabilization laws that were taken in effect, which actually at some point they're also against the tenants themselves. So my own opinion as a broker who also works with both landlords and a lot of tenants is, now if you're a tenant coming from out of town or you're the daughter of somebody and they want to pay the whole 1 year up front and the landlord wants to take your money, you want to give this money, and then the government stands in between you and tells you no, that is illegal. So that's causing a lot of problems. People with not perfect credit, it created a lot of room for like companies like insurance and guarantors that bring another middleman that actually increases the cost for the tenants. Sorry, rather than what initially was thought about. So what do we do about putting a little bit more thought into our local politicians that more landlord regulation brings and scrutinizes actually the tenants, because the landlord if it takes them 6 months to evict somebody, they're gonna be looking at application way stricter than if, let's say, if it was like in Florida, you know, you can take a tenant. So I think this is a big distress out there that's starting. How do you think we can go about actually somebody doing something about that?
So the rent stabilized laws that passed last June were the most ill-conceived. I can think of a million adjectives. It's really bad, right? To make it simple, it was the worst thing ever. It was passed by politicians pandering to voters who didn't realize what they're doing, or worse, knew what they were doing and did it anyway. So it affected value. It affected value for landlords. It affected value for owners of those rent stabilized leases, because you own that lease. If you had a lease, you had value, especially if you lived in the Upper East Side, Upper West Side, Park Slope, even Bed-Stuy, Bushwick. Like, there was value in your rent stabilized lease. And they took that value away from the very people they pretend they're trying to help, right? So it hurt, you know, and the taxes go up and there's no management of, you know, most of us have a budget to live by and we try to do that. And no matter how much you're earning, the city has no budget, right? They just tax people. So it was an ill-conceived pandering to votes for voters by politicians. And the only way that's going to change is if enough people wake up and say, hey, you know, Amazon wanted to come here, that would have brought jobs. That didn't happen. And I had a rent stabilized lease worth $100,000. Now I have zero. Until or unless people wake up and understand the ramifications, and not to mix politics and business, but guess what? They are mixed. You can't separate the two, because if you have good politics, you have good business, and business is what pays taxes and what funds our services that we need, vital services that we need for everybody, for all of us. Right? You need the police, you need the fire department, you need the garbage to be picked up, you need schools to operate. That comes from tax revenue, which comes from actual people. So people have to vote, right? And you have to know who you're voting for, what you're voting for. And it can't just be for free stuff. It has to be a well thought out business plan. And unfortunately, we don't have politicians that understand business. Otherwise you wouldn't. And I think what the biggest mistake was, over the years, there've been some very bad actors in New York, very bad landlords, who've taken full advantage of tenants and taken full advantage of skirting the laws. And you know what? The law should have been heavy on them, and it wasn't. And now the law is affecting everybody, including Mrs. whoever her name is, who lives in that apartment for 40 years, who had an asset she no longer has any value to. So it really affected a lot of people, not just landlords. And if I had to guess, the average landlord owns one building, not two and not 300. They probably own one building and probably have two jobs, and they're struggling to maintain that building, that 6-unit or 8-unit or 10-unit building, and they probably live in it. So it really hurt the little guy, who hurt everybody, but also hurt the little guy who every politician purports and claims they want to help, but they're not really helping.
I agree. I think that the small business in New York has been hit. You know, it's been the laws have been very unfriendly to the small business guys, because we all read that the biggest guys got richer with 580 billion over this crisis. So it's really like mounting, and I am worried that now with all this other social things that they want to implement, and now this craziness now with abolish the police and all this stuff, it may increase actually the taxes even more for like the regular middle guy, because the big guys would, you know, still be able to get tax cuts, and they're rarely affected that much. What do you I mean, I know you're based in Canada, right? How do you see the things in Canada? How do you think Canada maybe runs things better? What is your opinion, Andres?
It's a completely different set of circumstances. I mean, my business is predominantly in New York. We do work in Canada. Canada is a very different scenario, and what I would think is what Elliot mentioned about the changes in the rental market in New York City were so politically driven, without any sort of taking into consideration the impact on everyone, not only on the developers, on the end user and everyone else. It was, as he mentioned, ill-founded. Canada's laws are a little bit different, so it's kind of hard to really compare it. But I'm much more in tune with New York rental buildings that I'm, to be quite honest with you, with Canada. And Canada is actually the place where I live, but the place where I make my living and I really work is beautiful New York City.
So give us your opinion on New York City, on what Elliot do you agree with him? What do you think? Where do you think?
I agree with Elliot categorically, and I think that unless you are a very big macher who has a lot of land and your basis points are so good that you will be able to sort of like make rental properties or the development of rental property happen. But from a speculative type of development, I think what they've done is they just taken the wind out of development. And obviously, when you do development, you create value. And when you create value, you pay taxes. And when you pay taxes, you create this money goes back into the economy. So it's kind of like a catch-22. I think that sometimes these sort of like socialistic approaches to limiting development by trying to come up with some formula that doesn't make sense for anyone without really having some sort of open discussion with the business leaders doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I feel that much more decisions are based on emotions and based on feelings rather than based on well thought business plans, which is where I think the issue comes up. Everything becomes very politicized. Now we're living in the times that the American is very there's a lot of people who are very touched by communism and communist ideas, and we have a autonomous zone now in Seattle that people have barked and nobody's, so it's getting a little crazy for me. It's very strange because if you've told without getting too political, if you tell somebody 50 years ago or 60 years ago when America was actually fighting communism, would have been unheard of. But it seems that especially in the big cities, you do see mayors and the government going in that direction, which is in a very big change with all these other, states. And just as Elliot said, I've been seeing landlords looking in Florida, telling me they did a home run in Tennessee. And then what's going to happen at the end? We're going to kick out our investors. They're going to go down to other states. And the business is going to suffer because they tax us, it's 1.825% city and state transfer tax only. They increase the mansion tax as well. So, it's getting a little bit out of hand. But hopefully, people would realize that that's not really the way. And I don't know. We'll see when we get the next elections, because we have a second term by Bill de Blasio, and the city is getting a little bit out of hand. Nobody wants to take the subway anymore. No, subway access was one of the big things about building buildings. And now I've been talking to people who haven't been on the subway 3-4 months. And
I've been taking the train for 40 years. I'm not so certain I'm going back on it too soon, right? 40 years on the train, right?
Have you been on the train now?
I haven't been on a train since February.
I went on the train for the first time the other day, and surprisingly, it was okay. It was actually, I found it cleaner than ever. I was like, wow, MTA have never smelled cleaner like that. I mean, I'm not saying it's ideal, but I was at a point that I was like, okay, let me give it a shot. So
somebody woke up and decided to clean a train. Like, what a novel idea, right? Clean the train.
It was, right? That now we're cleaning it every night. I'm like, wow, when it was cleaned before? Was it just swept every once in a while?
Years they don't clean the train. They don't clean the train. They don't clean the train. Now they clean the train finally.
And what I'm also seeing is, and I don't know if you guys would agree, I was talking and I did an Instagram live with a lender. He was telling me that he sees a trend of more bigger apartments because he sees that maybe the family might want to live together? So maybe like a more desire for bigger units. Do you guys see that, or you think will still be, because a few years ago, 1 bedroom, 1 bath was the best value. So there are whole buildings that were built 1 bedroom, 1 bath by the developers, and now 2 bedroom, it's more desirable. Do you kind of see that growing, or?
I haven't. I've seen no discernible trend in any of it, so I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Yeah, and I would suggest that this depends on the area where you're doing the development. What you could do in Tribeca versus what you could do in the Flatiron district or the Upper East Side is completely, dictated by the market. So I don't think that there's a specific trend about size of units. I think that is very neighborhood centric.
Okay, that makes sense. And what are your favorite neighborhoods right now? First, personal favorite neighborhood in New York City, if you have to pick one, all time, your #1 favorite neighborhood, and then your neighborhoods that you think are, you still see value and a lot of opportunities out there, all across the 5 boroughs.
You're asking me or you're asking Elliot?
Whoever wants to respond first.
I think I love many neighborhoods in New York City. So Soho is beautiful. Tribeca is beautiful. Greenwich Village is beautiful. The West Village is beautiful. Upper East Side is great. Upper West Side is great. So New York has neighborhoods that will appeal to a huge variety of people's taste and wishes. I've been very fortunate that I happened to live in the city for close to 20 years and explore pretty much every area of the city, and they're all great. I mean, it just depends on your state of mind, right? So I think that New York offers great venues for many different demographics and people wishes. And like I said, if your state of mind is you want to be cool and hip, you are in Soho or the West Village. And if you want to live a little bit more family oriented, perhaps the Upper West Side or the Upper East Side may be more appealing to you. But New York is just a wonderful setting for whatever you really want.
Anything you want, it's available there, right? We have it all.
Absolutely.
I tend to agree. I don't have a specific favorite. There's Soho's great. Upper East Side is great. Everything's great. I like Brooklyn. I lived in Brooklyn my whole life, and I've been working in Brooklyn for the last 6 or 7 years. So it's great. It's it's a very diverse. New York and the outer boroughs are very diverse, and there's something good to be said about pretty much every neighborhood. Any neighborhood in Manhattan or Brooklyn or Queens, the Bronx. There's a lot of great things everywhere. And hopefully the rest of it will get better over time. Whatever is considered, let's say, not as desirable for whatever reason, hopefully will get better. Improving neighborhoods, improving schools, improving is beneficial to all of us, not just any one of us. So it's to all of our benefit to have everything improve, so the whole New York, all the boroughs, succeed.
Which area, which neighborhood in Brooklyn do you live in?
We live in the Gravesend neighborhood, southern Brooklyn.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, Southeast Brooklyn seeing a lot of activity, very hot market, and I think will continue being very hot. A lot of value still left there. So what do you guys, what do you think, what is your projection for the rest of the year, if you have one? Do you have any thoughts about kind of what's gonna happen? Do you think that we should be more cautious, or we should be investing more? For the general, like small or big?
Like my crystal ball's in the shop, right? So generally speaking, from my perspective, I really have no idea what's going to happen. I sort of take things as each project comes along. I try to analyze what it is. I kind of think values will stay sort of the same for a while, particularly in the rent stabilized. They may get worse a little bit. In the residential business, if you have price points like 5 million, 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, it's crystal clear to me that there's a lot of inventory, right? So whether it gets absorbed or not in the short term, we'll see. In the long term, it probably does, just a matter of what price point. But I think there's been a shock to the system. COVID was definitely a major shock to the system, and the system was kind of slowing down anyway a little bit in New York preceding that. It may have been so apparent for some people, it was pretty apparent to me and other people. There was a slowdown anyway. This COVID thing, if you told me in March that there's, a virus is going to come, wipe out the global economy and shut down New York for 3 months, I'd say you're crazy, right? But unfortunately it did happen. And none of us really know what this phase 1 means or phase 2 means. None of us know anything, right? So I'm cautiously optimistic. I think in the long run, things will be fine. I've been through 6 or 7 bad cycles in life, so they come, they go, and hopefully you can withstand cautiously optimistic is how I just keep phrasing what I'm looking at.
I think that's a good term, cautiously optimistic. That's a good state of mind.
You know what? I tend to agree with Elliot. I'm cautiously optimistic. However, I believe in the resiliency and the strength of New Yorkers to turn things around. So the cautiously optimistic approach is there, but I believe that we will turn things around and things will come back. And obviously we're dependent on the circumstances, and as Elliot said, the crystal ball is in the shop, and hopefully things will get better. And but this is something that I don't think we ever experienced before in our lifetime. So we're hoping for the best, to be quite honest with you.
Hoping for the best, prepared for the worst, right? Maybe something like that.
Hopefully not the worst, but
hopefully not the worst. I think that we've seen the worst already.
I hope so, and I hope it only goes up from this point. If we can touch base a little bit, I don't know if you, Andres, also work on the retail and on commercial. We saw that was crazy that we saw in New York, Saks and Fifth Avenue, now all bars and a lot of, I read an article on Yahoo that 100,000 small businesses in New York City may never reopen, and also the restaurant hospitality business. How do you see the future of retail in New York City from your perspective?
Well, I think that we saw retail coming or changing dramatically with the online shopping. I think that Amazon and everyone else, they saw the future being different, and COVID had kind of like brought us to an even much more the reality kind of like hit, because everybody now, given the circumstances, they adopted online shopping as their models, as the MO. So it's kind of like that discomfort that some people had towards purchasing goods online, it kind of disappeared and is becoming the way of shopping. So I think that retailers they will have a very hard time to redefine themselves. Restaurants, people still love going to experience great food and great experiences. So short term maybe will be a little bit difficult, but I think that people will still go and gravitate to go and have a great experience in a restaurant. But retail, I'm a little concerned about how they will be able to rebound in the same way that they used to operate before. Even myself, I look at myself and I never purchased, to be honest with you, this many things online. And now my wife and I, all that we do is everything we purchase, we do it online. That changes your behavior. And I think that the typical retailer will not be able to operate in the same fashion that they used to in the past.
How about office spaces? Because now, companies like Twitter set our workers can indefinitely work from home. Do you see the, office space also being challenged? And after that, also Elliot, can also give me the opinion.
Well, not everyone wants to be isolated. I think that is a personal decision. I do agree with companies that will offer their employees the opportunity to work from home remotely. I think that we were conditioned to work in an office space for whatever reason. I don't necessarily think that approach was the right approach. I think that people should be able to, they could be as efficient and from a remote location, especially in certain type of businesses. Obviously, not every business applies. But in my case, my staff, for instance, I would suggest that 40 to 50%, they would want to continue working from home. And some of them don't necessarily enjoy the being encapsulated into their own homes, and they may need to be outside. But again, as long as you offer that possibility, what it definitely will do is will deplete some of that real estate. And obviously, we're going to have to find ways to optimize that vacancy. But again, in this kind of situation, I think that we learn a lot and we adapt, and we don't really know what the lingering effects will be, but there will certainly be a fair amount of people who would want to work from their own home.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. What do you think, Elliot?
So for retail, I have a little different take, right? So retail, what everyone's reading in the news now, putting Amazon aside, which has definitely had a big effect, is about everything going bankrupt. But the truth is, all these companies going bankrupt were bankrupt 5 years ago. They were just able to borrow more and more money, cheaper debt, and keep refinancing that debt until somebody pulled the plug, and the plug was pulled, right? COVID pulled the plug. So if you split retail up into very urban, densely populated retail, there's street retail in residential neighborhoods that will be fine and will be run well by well-managed, low-levered retailers who will serve the local population. And I think they'll do fine, right? I think they'll do fine. We looked at a piece in Brooklyn that has a significant amount of interest from retailers right now to put a brand new store there, right? So, and we spoke to some of those retailers, and they're well-managed, low-leveraged, and doing business. And they track local, urban, densely populated renters and owners. When you have retail, it might be, to tie it back into office space, if you have retail at the base of an office building where there's no activity in the evening or in the weekends, that's going to be more challenging, right? More challenging because the office space market has definitely changed. I don't know the buildings will be 100% filled up again in office, right? I think there'll be, some people have, a friend of mine's got a massive office footprint. His lease is up in August. He can't wait to downsize to half the space and let some people work at home if they choose to, if they can manage that. So with retail specifically, I think there are definitely tenants who will make it and survive and thrive in urban areas. If you have a shopping center maybe in East Earmuff, Nebraska, you might have a little bit of a problem, let's say. But for urban parts of Brooklyn and the boroughs, Manhattan, I think for sure. And we made an investment in Soho, and it's a debt investment, but we're very confident in the collateral. We're very confident in the property, and that it'll be fine, right? And our basis is very good. But for the office market, I can't imagine offices being filled up tomorrow. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 7. I don't think it matters. I think a lot of people are sort of shaken by this, and a lot of owners and business owners recognize that, hey, maybe they can run some staff from home. Maybe there's an economic benefit to the owner to pay them a little bit less because there's no more commuting time, and they have more, as long as they execute their business from home and do their jobs. That may have changed dramatically, potentially. My office is very inexpensive, and I'm happy with it. It's efficient, so it doesn't change me. I'm going to go back. I go back once a week anyway now, or twice a week sometimes. 100, 200 people on my floor. Any given time, there's like 2 people roaming around, 3 people roaming around. So it'll get better. It'll get busier. But we'll see. I think retail will be better than office in some ironic way.
how are
Well,
landlords?
you know, Martina, I think that one point that Elliot made that I totally agree with him is that well-managed mom pop type of retail, back to basics. And what I mean back to basics is because retail is not only clothing, retail is um, a butcher, retail is a pastry shop, retail is, um, you know, even restaurants to a certain extent. And basically, I think authentic, back to basics type of retail is going to thrive because there's going to be a level of comfort that you're getting the best product. You see, some of the larger retailers kind of depleted that grassroots retail that our parents experienced. And when they used to say you're buying the best bread and the best cheese and the best, where is it now? So, you know, we're going to this big box, which is processed and is good. And, you know, they have a place in the market. But I think that in urban areas, all these new, and I use the term back to basics because back to basics means authenticity, means you're getting the best products, they're artisanal, they're like, I think that those type of retailers will do very well, and they will be well appreciated by their clientele. Um, so yeah, so there's permutations of what's going to happen, but yeah, there's optimism on from my part in that sort of type of approach to retail business.
So how do you guys think that the landlords are gonna bounce back by all these months that the retail tenants haven't paid rent? Because I know from talking to a bunch of like the landlords that I have relationships with, and I've been asking them how many people have paid rent, and I've seen in residential all across the board there are different amounts, depends how you run your business. But in retail, I've pretty much been seeing nobody paying rent for the past 2 months. How do you think they still have to pay? I mean, even if the mortgage is deferred, it still has to. The bank is still gonna ask for their money eventually. How do you think they're gonna bounce back?
Some of the larger landlords are actually suing, rightfully so, their larger tenants who have significant amounts of liquidity, who just use COVID as an excuse, right? So if you're a very large corporation with significant liquidity, you got to pay your rent or pay it back at some point, right? But I've noticed that, and funny enough, in 2007, 2008, we had some like mom and pop tenants who couldn't pay rent, and they were the first tenants to come back and apologize and pay their rent because they make a living off of it.
Yes.
From the store. They would walk in apologizing that they were behind on rent. And the bigger companies would like try to slow you up and we'll pay you, we won't pay you. So it's sort of interesting, but I think you're morally obligated to have the money to pay something, right? If you're having a real challenge, then any smart landlord will work it out with a tenant that can't afford it. There's a difference between can't affording it and not wanting to afford it, right? So, if you can't afford it, you should pay it. Similarly, we've had in some residential collections, some buildings have been excellent, like phenomenally good, and some have been less than phenomenally good, right? So part of that is by neighborhood, part of that is by what the building's designed for, whether it's student housing or people who are already working at home and have a 4-bedroom apartment and one of those bedrooms is their office, right? So as far as retail, it's kind of hard to pay rent when you're not in business, but there are definitely enough companies that have enough liquidity to make it up at some point, if not immediately at some point. But the mortgage has to get paid. So if you have a mortgage, it's one thing. If you don't have a mortgage, it's something else, but that mortgage has to get paid by the landlord. But it hurts in New York specifically when politicians run around and say, don't pay rent, don't pay rent. And guess what? Some people don't pay rent, right? Because they think it's now law. I don't gotta pay rent, politician said so. So, ultimately, I think that the tenants who can pay will pay. And very unfortunately, some people, and very unfortunate because people sunk their life savings and their blood, sweat, and tears into their business, may not be able to make it, unfortunately.
Okay. Okay, well, if you guys want to tell me some last words to wrap it up for our call today, kind of like just like a message to our viewers that you can share.
Get Andres, you go first. I'm nothing. I'll think it through.
Well, you know what? I think that I would like to thank everyone who adhered to these sort of drastic measures to try to avoid the proliferation of the COVID-19. I think that we've done our best, and we're trying to protect our families, our friends, our colleagues, and our economy. I think that the sooner we get out of these sort of terrible testing times, everything will hopefully come back to normal. So I'm optimistic, and I believe in the good of people and what they've done. I mean, this was a huge sacrifice for many people, and still will continue to be. So I'm just thankful that for those people who adhere to some sort of composure during these testing times, and that's kind of like my humble sort of like thankful thoughts towards the people who have helped alleviate the situation.
Okay, that's very good. It's being thankful is extremely important. I can't agree more than you, more to you on that. I think.
I could add, know who you're voting for, which I think is very important. And, be optimistic, be happy, breathe, think of other people, maybe, pray a little bit, pray for the sick. There's still plenty of people out there who are sick, need prayers, and be thankful we have, doctors, nurses, hospital staff, essential workers who really keep the ball rolling. And, just look forward to the future. That's it.
Let's wrap it up. What I like to say, that the future is always bright if we make it, because we make the future. Besides the circumstances, we can